Introducing Fidelity Trader Plus, the next generation of advanced trading from Fidelity. Customize your tools and charts and access them seamlessly across desktop, web, and mobile. For faster trades, anywhere you go. Try the all-new Fidelity Trader Plus. Learn more about our most powerful trading platform yet at fidelity.com/trader plus. Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. Member NYSE, SIPC.
This is the Cats Roundtable with John Catsimatidis.
Everywhere around the world, they come to America. Every time that flag's unfurled, they come to America.
Good morning, America. This is the Cats Roundtable. John Catsimatidis here. Father's Day. What a great show we have today. Jay Jackson, that gives us some statistics and how long are we going to live? Lynn Shaw, fighting for our kids. Ohio Treasurer Robert Sprague, what's going on in the state of Ohio? John Sununu, Dr. Peter Michalos, live long and prosper. Roger Stone, Bonnie Brady, maybe we're solving the problem with those windmills. And let's start off today with General Jack Keane, who really knows what's going on in the Middle East and Iran. With us today is General Jack Keane. General Jack Keane, give us your pulse of the situation.
Well, I think what we have in front of us, obviously we have an MOU that it now has been signed. And what the deal really is, it's a recognition that there's a major shift of the administration's priorities away from military objectives to economic and political objectives. And what has happened here, the president's advisors have landed the idea with the president that the oil and gas prices that rose as a result of closing the Straits of Hormuz, coupled with Iran's ability to retaliate if military operations were resumed against the Gulf states' oil and gas infrastructure and be effective against that infrastructure, those two things together would produce a worldwide depression. And as a result of that, we have entered into these negotiations. And just to give you a sense of it, remember, the war began on the 28th of February. On the 2nd of March, the Iranians closed the Straits of Hormuz. Then a number of weeks later, we went to a ceasefire given the rise in oil prices that were taking place and the concern that would have politically and economically. 4 days later, we began a naval blockade, recognized that we needed some leverage against the Iranians after a few weeks of negotiations and nothing was happening to get them to close the straits. It became obvious they didn't care about the economic peril the blockade was putting on their people, and we needed more leverage. So as a result of that, then on May the 4th, the administration initiated Project Freedom, which was to open the Straits of Hormuz forcibly using military. In the 36th hour, the president stopped the operation at the request of Saudi Arabia and other Arab states. Why? They were concerned that, one, we wouldn't be able to get it done effectively, two, that Iran would retaliate against their oil and gas infrastructure. So as a result of that, we stopped Operation Freedom, and we continue to go on.
And Iran was retaliating against the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and everybody, wasn't they?
They had two strategies. One was to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and that obviously was effective. And two, to retaliate immediately, not just against Israel, but actually much more so against our allies and partners in the region, particularly those that own oil and gas infrastructure, because they wanted them to understand that they were going to be vulnerable to them. This was not going to be about the United States, Israel, and Iran. This was going to be about them. And they wanted that pressure from them to be put on the United States. And that was somewhat effective, as I just described. And even when we were ready to go back into military operations, and that was just a few weeks ago, and the president was pretty close to it, the Pakistanis, the Arab states, the other Islamic states came to the president in that meeting, and they asked him not to do it, to continue into negotiations and see if you could get a diplomatic solution. So I wanted our audience to understand, why we are on the path that we are on. It was a major shift in presidential priorities away from the military operation. Remember, the military operation lasted 4 to 5 weeks. Objectives take everything offensive away from the Iranians: nuclear, ballistic missiles, drones, support for proxies as well, weaken the regime so much that eventually, in time, the people would be able to take charge of Iran once again. So we walked away from that because of the economic and political objectives that the president began to attempt to achieve. And that produced the deal that's in front of us. Now, what the challenge of the deal, the most immediate challenge, John, that deals with Israel and Hezbollah. Iran is trying to separate the United States from Israel over the Hezbollah and Lebanon issue. Iran doesn't have any claim to Lebanon. Yes, they support Hezbollah. They've organized them. They have resourced them. They're their number one major proxy. But these Hezbollah are Lebanese citizens operating in Lebanon in the interest of Iran. And if they're attacking Israel under the ceasefire, which they have done in the last 24 hours and have been doing since April the 17th, Israel has every right to respond to that. What they have done, Hezbollah, so our audience understands, they have attacked into northern Israel with 2,000 rockets and drones since April the 17th and within the last 24 hours with the recent ceasefire. And as a result of that, over 300 Israeli citizens have been wounded. They have moved out of the towns and villages in northern Israel. The kids are not going to school. They're living with families or they're in motels. And Israel cannot stand for that. There's no way that Israel can have their sovereignty violated that and not respond militarily. We need to support Israel publicly, not just privately, in doing this, and not let Iran drive a wedge.
Well, on
Friday,
Thursday night, they what was it? The Hezbollah attacked Israel. Israel hit them back twice as hard, and the White House made no comment. So making no comment is acknowledging that you have to do what you have to do.
That is true, but also there have been other statements made by the vice president, as you heard, trying to get Israel to calm down, so to speak.
Yes.
Israel has to do what is appropriate for what is in the sense of what is being threatened on them. They have the intelligence. They know what they are doing here, and we need to support them. And we cannot let Iran have a veto over Israelis' operations in Lebanon, and that's what they're trying to do by pressuring the United States. I think the president understands this, and I don't think he's going to put pressure on Israel to stop their operations when they're fighting for their sovereignty. I mean, Iran's objective is to destroy the state of Israel. It's not the physical destruction unless they had a nuclear weapon. They cannot defeat the Israeli military. What they want to do is create such a volatile security situation inside of Israel among a relatively small population in the world, 7 million Jews, and make that situation so volatile and insecure that they want to raise their family and kids there. In other words, they would migrate out of Israel. That is what they're trying to achieve. And in northern Israel right today, they are achieving that by the families moving away from that danger area. So, yes, they must respond, and they must complete the operation of getting Hezbollah out of the southern part of Lebanon. They cannot let that stand.
This is an hour-by-hour situation. This is a day-by-day situation, and there's no way to make it looks like the peace is going to hold. It looks like the Strait of Hormuz will stay open because Iran does not dare do anything to change that because he'll go in there and kick their butt.
Well, what the president is holding as leverage, he has a couple of things. One, he has financial resources that he can hold on to, and two, obviously, military leverage. And that's the reality. And they certainly are aware of that. And I think, John, what the Iranians will do is drag out these negotiations, as they already had. Remember, we started out with 2 weeks of negotiations when we went to the ceasefire back on April the 8th to get the Straits of Hormuz open. Well, they dragged that out for 9 weeks. And they're going to drag this out for sure. The whole 60 days is what the clock is, and likely longer than that. Because they believe the closer you get to the midterm elections in the United States, and they pay close attention to what's happening here, the less likelihood, John, that the president would initiate combat operations. And as a result, the Straits of Hormuz would be closed again, oil prices going up very close to the election.
Well, General, thank you so much for an update. Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day to you and to our audience out there. Great talking to you, as
Thank
always.
you.
The Cats Roundtable.
Well, which way is America going? Well, we have an old-timer here that's been around. His name is Van Hipp. He was Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army, and he's also now the chairman of the American Defense International in Washington, D.C. This year is 250 years for our country. And, Van, I'm going to tell you how I feel. If the wrong person would have become president in the last election, I'm not sure we would have made the 300th year for our country.
No, John, you're absolutely right. I think this country was hanging together by a thread until President Trump won, and thank God he did. Our Western values and culture are under attack, and there have been studies out that show that, and this came out on Holocaust Remembrance Day a few years ago, 22% of millennials weren't sure if they knew what the Holocaust was. 67% had not heard of Auschwitz, and the Woodrow Wilson Institute found that only 1 in 3 Americans could pass the citizenship test. So I think the 250th is an opportunity for us to instill in young people what it means to be an American, what our forefathers went to come to this country and assimilate, and a chance, I think, to really save this generation. Because, as you know, President Reagan reminded all of us, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction.
I can't believe how close we came to ruining this country under the President Biden Association. And, I don't blame President Biden because I don't think he was mentally there. And the people around him running the country at that point, I mean, they had invasion. People invaded our country with drugs, with criminals, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, finally, President Trump was aware of that and he straightened it out.
You're so right. And one of the things that President Trump has done, too, I think internationally, and also domestically, focusing on the workforce that we need to compete in the world and also to deal with communist China. John, I had the honor last year to give the keynote address in Taiwan at their National Security Summit. And I said artificial intelligence, quantum, and spectrum. Those are the 3 equalizers of the battlefield. That's how a smaller combatant can go toe-to-toe with a much larger adversary. And President Trump is doing so much in these areas, and also workforce development. And we're seeing things now. President Trump had his acting Secretary of Labor, Keith Sonderling, visit Florida Atlantic University just last month because they've got a high school down there and an elementary school, A.D. Henderson University School, where kids are learning about artificial intelligence. They just won a national drone competition, and the Secretary was blown away. So we're seeing schools like that. I talked about Spectrum. Baylor University right now, young people from all over the country are going there right now to learn about spectrum and workforce development so we can win the spectrum race versus communist China. But President Trump, with his leadership, has put so much of this in place.
We have a big November election coming up. And, and half the country is trying to criticize President Trump. But, my money is on Trump. He knows what he's doing.
You're right, and a lot of people have lost a lot of bets betting against this president. But I do think what we've got to do, and I wrote a piece not too long ago praising the Superintendent of Education in South Carolina, Ellen Weaver, what she's done. She worked with the American Battlefield Trust, John, and I'm on the board of that. And we work with her, and we have a curriculum, K through 12 in the public schools of South Carolina, what it means to be an American. That's the kind of education we need in our public schools to save this generation. And our good friend, Governor George Pataki, when he was governor of New York, he worked with the American Battlefield Trust to preserve the battlefields and try to do the same there in New York. But we've got that framework, and I think the 250 is an opportunity to get other states to replicate that all over the country.
As the chairman of the American Defense International, tell me how you're working on that to help our country go forward and make a better place for our kids and grandkids.
Well, over the years, what I've tried to do is find technology that America needs, particularly from a national security standpoint, and also from a medical standpoint. But mainly, years ago, when I ran the mobilization office at the Pentagon for the Army, I had to learn a little bit about a lot of things, and that's been my focus, focusing on the national security things that America needs to maintain that competitive edge against our adversaries.
Mr. Secretary Van Hipp, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for continuing to work for our country, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. Let's go to Ohio. With us today is Robert Sprague, and he is the 49th Ohio Treasurer, and now he's running for re-election as the Secretary of State. Robert Sprague, tell us what the heck is going on in Ohio. Ohio is a big swing state.
Yes, Ohio's turning into that battleground state once again. You know, the Ohio Senate seat between John Husted, that race, John's very, very strong and good, versus Sherrod Brown on the Democrat side, will probably determine control of the United States Senate. So it has national implications. And look, it's being able to talk with a lot of the people who are the blue-collar workers in the state of Ohio that still make things and move things in our state, and being able to connect with them. And that's what this election is going to come down to. And then may also have a dramatic effect in the presidential race in 2028. And, you know, I'm running to be Secretary of State, but that's why the security and the integrity of the elections is so important, because we want to make sure that we get it right and we reflect the views of the people and the votes of the people of the state of Ohio. And I know you do that in New York, too.
We got so many problems in our country, and we're lucky that, we're going to celebrate our 250th year. And I worry because after President Biden, if Harris would have won, I would worry if we would get to the 300th year.
Look, I agree with you. I'm right there. And I can tell you that it's so interesting what sort of things are going on across our nation. And one of the things that you look at in Ohio is we have a very good candidate that's running for governor. His name is Vivek Ramaswamy, and he has national ties. He's got some great ideas about how to make life more affordable for Ohioans and at the same time be able to increase people's wages. And when you're going out and you're talking with people, that's one of the number one issues. We want the economy to be strong, and people trust Republicans to be able to do that. And the other thing that people trust Republicans to do is to have secure elections with integrity. And my goal as Secretary of State in Ohio is to make sure that we run the most secure elections in the history of our state. One of the things that I want to do when I'm Secretary of State is to make sure that we move to a front-end citizenship check, so that we check if you're an American citizen before you get to be registered to vote in our state.
And Ohio is a big swing state, so it's very important that you guys do things right. Tell me about Vivek's race. That's an important race for governor. And tell us about your Senate races.
Yeah, so Vivek's race is going to be critical to the future of our state. One of the things that we've seen during the war with Iran is that we have to be able to produce more for our defense and industrial base. And a lot of that is drone technology, it's robotics, it's the future of making us strong as a country and our defense strong. And, we still manufacture those things in Ohio. Matter of fact, we have one of the largest aeronautical parts producing companies on the face of the earth. That's a strength for us, and I think you're going to see good Republican leadership that recognizes that our defense industrial base needs investment, and it will encourage that, not just for the strength of the nation, but also for our economy. Also, energy production is incredibly important. We have the Marcellus and the Utica Shale. If you take Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, you combine them into a country, it's the third largest natural gas producing nation on the face of the earth. And so Vivek has got a great vision as to how we increase jobs, the number of jobs in our state. We invest in our infrastructure and at the same time in our defense industrial base. Now, with regards to this John Husted, Sherrod Brown race, I mean, look, Sherrod Brown has presided over something like $30 trillion of federal spending over his 40-year plus career in the United States Senate and in the United States government. I think that Ohioans are tired of him because he's just not produced for the state. And John Husted is a new face. He's been very strong. Used to be Secretary of State and then Lieutenant Governor. Did some incredible things for the economy of the state of Ohio. It's one of the reasons why Intel made a huge investment in a chip plant in Columbus, Ohio. And we are beginning to reinvest in ourselves. And it's because of the work that John Husted did as Lieutenant Governor. And he's done a great job in the United States Senate, being one of the leading proponents of the Save America Act. I think Congress should pass that. And one of the things we're going to do in the state of Ohio is that if Congress can't pass that, we're going to make sure that we require photo ID for everybody that shows up in person and also the people that are casting mail-in ballots in Ohio. It's the most fundamental security measure that we have to run elections with integrity, is simply making sure that people are who they say they are. And people should have to show photo ID to buy beer or cigarettes or go to the airport and fly or rent a car. It's a fundamental security measure that we're going to implement in Ohio, and John Husted has pushed for in the United States Senate. So I'm very optimistic about that race. John's going to do a great job.
Well, thank you so much for calling in. And you're running for Secretary of State?
We will turn red once again, John, and I think it's our candidates and the leadership of our president that are going to do that for Ohio. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Thank you so much for coming on, and let's stay in touch.
Very good. All right, thank you.
The Cats Roundtable.
And with us today is Bonnie Brady, and she's the Executive or Policy Director of the New England Fishermen's Association. Bonnie Brady, you've been working on this, on these windmills. And I understand there's some big developments in Washington this week.
Big developments indeed, John. The Trump administration announced they were buying back 4 more offshore wind leases from Invenergy. They are a group that had 3 on the East Coast and 1 out in California. Leading Light Wind was the largest project, and they had suspended the project in 25. The company and 2 Gulf of Maine floating wind lease areas, plus a California floating wind lease. So all 4 of those, $765 million was paid to terminate the 4 leases, and they agreed to redirect investment toward natural gas generation and geothermal projects.
Now, which windmills does that affect? Does that affect the ones in Long Island that we and you were worried about originally?
No, unfortunately not yet. Overall, there have been 8 lease buybacks so far since this news yesterday. We have Attentive Energy, that's in the New York Bight. That was Total Energies, 3 gigawatts. That's a big project. We've got Carolina Long Bay, that was down in North Carolina. Blue Point Wind, also in the Bight, but further south from the Empire Project. Leading Light, again, right down off of shore of New Jersey. And the Gulf of Maine leases, that's way up on Maine, 2 of those, plus Golden State Wind out in California, and another one that was just yesterday's, another offshore wind lease area. So we still have active leases, active projects in construction. The one you're thinking of mostly is Empire Wind. They are under development, and last I heard...
Are they working on it? Are they still working on it?
They're waiting on a big crane lift coming from Singapore to help them put the turbines and the blades on, yes. And so that's a really big, big issue.
And the
for all
people,
of us.
and to your best knowledge, is the Trump administration knowledgeable of that?
They are knowledgeable. As so far, we don't know what their plan is. But I do know that I read yesterday in one of the foreign papers that Equinor, who owns Empire Wind, that's the 54 turbine project right off of JFK and Newark Airport and right from New York City, they were looking to possibly having Ørsted pick up that project because Equinor owns 10% of Ørsted. But so far, we don't know anything. The problem, of course, is the national security issues still haven't been solved. I've said this to you before. It's mind-boggling. Someone in the administration needs to hear this. They only used one turbine to go to the FAA and get a determination of no hazard. All the other 53 turbines were never reviewed by the FAA under the guise of, but it's outside of 12 miles. So that's a BOEM issue, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. That's not us. Planes fly outside of 12 miles. So does search and rescue. So do drones.
These people are doing harm to the environment. They're doing harm to the consumer by the electricity is going to cost them 300% more, and they're doing harm. And they're doing harm to our national security.
John, it's not just Empire; it's Vineyard Wind. They did 3. They've never done a cumulative study of every single turbine. They say, don't worry. If we need to, we can call NORAD, and we promise to answer the phone and stop the blades. It's not just the blades spinning. It's the actual line of sight and the fact that you're going to be building a steel forest so that we are literally flying blind. And
Marty Brady, God bless you, and thank you for keeping the consumer and our listeners informed.
Thanks so much, John.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. If you ever miss a segment or want to hear it again, go to WABCRadio.com, go to podcasts, go to minicast, and play back your favorite segment. Well, let's go to New Hampshire. We have Senator John Sununu there, and he's running for re-election. Tell us your feeling about what's going on.
Well, John, great to be with you. Happy Father's Day. You know, you talk about common sense, trying to get a little bit of common sense back in Washington, get some practical experience there. You know, I'm running after being in the private sector for over 15 years because we need people that understand how the economy works in Washington. We need people who can solve problems. That's what my engineering background is all about. Too many career politicians spend all their time in Washington worrying about getting their next job. And, you know, I'm at the point in my life where I've enjoyed my work in the private sector. I've served in the House and Senate, and I know when I go back to Washington as a U.S. Senator, all I have to do is stand up for New Hampshire, right? Whatever's right for my state and our country is what's going to guide me. And that's a really exciting place to be in politics.
There's a lot of common sense Democrats. There's a lot of common sense independents. And there's a lot of common sense Republicans. We all have to work together to make sure our country doesn't go in the wrong direction.
Yeah, you know, I think the liberals in Washington go wrong when they just start following their leadership blindly. And in New Hampshire, that's what I'm running against. My opponent in the general election is someone who supported a $1,200 taxpayer benefit for illegal immigrants. 3 weeks ago, he voted for a national car tax. He's against voter ID, you know, just out of touch with where people in New Hampshire are. And I point out to people all the time, when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker, Chris Pappas, my general election opponent, voted with her 222 out of 223 possible recorded votes. You know, that's a rubber stamp. I think they're fond of using the phrase sock puppet. for the left wing, and it's just not New Hampshire, right? It might be California, but it's not New Hampshire.
We want a better life for our kids and our grandkids, and we got to get rid of these drug addicts, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, nothing can be more important than protecting our cities, our towns, public safety, and that is absolutely part of the equation. Securing the borders is such an important part of the equation. Think about 2.5, 3 years ago, the borders were chaos. Tens of thousands of people coming across illegally, suffering. I mean, a real human tragedy. And the left wing said, we can't do anything about it, right? We cannot do anything about it without some big, expensive piece of legislation. The president proved them wrong. We've got secure borders for the first time in decades. And the murder rate, the homicide rate in this country is lower than it's been in over 100 years. So that public safety, fighting drugs, securing our borders, supporting law enforcement at the local level.
And we got to get rid of fraud too. I mean, fraud.
Yeah. So it's incredible, and credit to the administration for exposing what went on in California, what's going on in Minnesota. Hundreds of billions of dollars, right? It looks like every year, and that our debt, $39 trillion in debt, that's the biggest economic risk we face over the next 10 years. We've got to get rid of the fraud, got to cut the deficit, and controlling that spending, right? Dealing with this out of control fraud is the only way to balance a budget. You don't balance a budget by just jacking up taxes. If that was the case, then your state of New York and California would have the best, cleanest, most solid budgets in the country, and they don't. Right? You just can't do it by jacking up taxes. You got to control the spending, and fraud is the first place we should start.
John Sununu, thank you. Keep fighting for America. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, John. Great to be with you.
The Cats Roundtable.
Jay Jackson, welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. You run a great company, and I understand you're going to be going on a New York Stock Exchange soon and having a big presentation. But You know what impressed me? That you told me after I take, I guess, a medical test or whatever, that you can evaluate within 1 year, 2 years, 3 years of how long I'm going to live. I'm not sure I want to know.
I know. Hey, I get it. And what's fascinating about that is what's amazing about this data is that this data can be incredibly helpful to people so that they better understand how to allocate while they're in retirement. Number one fear of everyone out there when they retire is running out of money. That idea of leaving money in the mattress, it still exists.
You have a unique new company.
Yes.
Where if I'm 65 years old, oh, Jesus Christ, I hate to tell you, I'm 77.
Oh, man.
Now, if I have a $10 million policy,
right,
and you say, well, you don't like any of your heirs, you don't like anybody that you have to give that money to, I'll give you X if you sell me the policy, and that way you have that money to spend on your life and yourself and having a great time instead of leaving it to people you don't like.
Oh, my goodness. Well, hopefully.
Is that the right way to
it's
say
just
it?
a part of it. I think what's interesting is that a lot of people want to leave it to the people that they like and they don't like. But the challenge with this is that 90% of the time, people might consider leaving that money to their heirs, but instead they look at their life insurance policy as an expense. They don't realize that it's equity. They don't realize, just like their home, they have real value in it. So you have a $10 million life insurance policy. That policy in today's value may be worth as much as $2, $3, $4 million.
So in other words, at the age of 77, I might get $2, $3, $4 million,
right,
and spend it on yachts.
Right.
On whatever.
Or invest
on vacations.
Invested in Abacus.
Forget about it.
That's not a bad place to be.
I want to have a good time.
Yeah, that's right. You have a good time with it. You can invest it. You can put that money to work for yourself.
Now, would you tell me how long I have?
Then that's what we're going to do.
Or you keep it a secret?
Well, the most reasons why
if you keep it a secret.
No, I tell you.
I might want to keep a secret.
No, well, here's the thing. I want you to know, and you know why? Because that data is the most valuable data you can possibly have. It can help improve your outcomes in your policy, but also your financial plan. Remember,
and maybe I'll go to the doctor more often.
Well, hopefully, right? I think that some people would have the funds to go to the doctor more often. I think that the way people view their lifespan seems to be negative, right? They're like, gosh, I've got this $10 million policy. The issue is I don't know when I'm going to get paid on it. Now we can help you better understand whether you sell it to us or whether you keep it. You might be in it for, 3 years or 7 years.
So your company is an insurance type company, Abacus on the New York Stock Exchange, where you make the spread about your predictions on how long the person is going to live versus your investment.
Yeah, we're actually an investment company, but what we do is that those predictions are based on real data that goes back over 20 years. I give you that data and you apply it not just to insurance, but you apply it to your entire financial plan. Quick example. If you have two people, right, 65, getting ready to retire, they get the exact same financial plan. But if one has chronic disease, their financial plan should look much, much different. What we've now shown is that we can double your retirement income just by you better understanding how long you're going to be in retirement. That's massive.
And you've done very well. Your company's doing very well. I look at it and I bought a few shares to disclose everybody. I bought a few shares. So you make the money, the differential between your prediction and what your person is going to live to.
We charge fees on asset management, meaning we run assets based upon this model and helping people better understand how long they're going to be in retirement. And then in addition to that, we actually own that policy. We buy that policy, we take the risk, we pay the future premiums, and then ultimately we would collect the claim at some point in the future.
I understand. Well, Jay Jackson, I look forward to you. When you come back to New York, I look forward to be down in New York Stock Exchange with you and ring the bell. And
absolutely.
And God bless you. God bless America.
Thank you. God bless you.
With us today is Roger Stone. Well, Roger, what do you want to cover first?
Well, John, I think the first and foremost, of course, has to be the peace agreement, the fact that the president has ended the hostilities. Now, I admit to you, this is a fragile peace, but he has freed up the world oil market, and I think that's very, very significant.
And I can't understand the amount of criticism he's getting because nobody else had the courage to stand up and get things done.
The problem, of course, is if you're Donald Trump, you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't. So the people who criticized him for Midnight Hammer, criticized him for Epic Fury, who criticized him for correctly reacting to the intelligence that indicated the Iranians were closer to a nuclear weapon than we thought, now they're the same people who are criticizing him for ending that conflict.
I mean, he's taking a big bite out of the drug war. I mean, he's established the fact that the amount of fraud that's going on. So between drugs, fraud, the voting problem, the Medicare problem, that's another big mess.
Let's talk about the voter thing for a moment because I think it's crucial. Unfortunately, what we saw here in these recent Los Angeles elections are the precursor to what we're going to see once again nationally. It is mathematically and statistically impossible for the candidate who was running third and who got 24% of the vote in the actual early voting and election day voting to now suddenly get 64% of the votes in the late incoming paper ballots, mail-in ballots, with the other Democrat, Karen Bass, is the current mayor, getting the rest of those votes, and of course the third candidate, the Republican, getting none. Mathematicians and statisticians I've talked to tell me this is numerically and mathematically impossible, therefore a giant indicator of fraud. Look, I think you and I both agree. Mail-in voting is a bad idea. Attorney General Bill Barr, in an epic interview with Wolf Blitzer on CNN, said correctly, it's an open invitation for voter fraud. We need to return to the way elections were, John, when you and I were growing up. One man, one person, one vote. In a machine that's not an electronic. It can be an old-fashioned machine, but not one that is interconnected to other machines or to one central server.
If it's connected to the internet, I have a serious problem, because once it's connected to the internet, anything can happen.
Yes, it can be easily manipulated. Now, if the French can count 38 million paper ballots on Election Day, the French, you can't tell me that we can't do that. Of course we can do that. And until we do return to the election day being exactly that, and Election Day, that's the end. All votes are counted by Election Day. Absentee ballots, yes. Other than that, we need to go back to the way it was. One person, one vote, paper ballot, all on one day, no mail-ins, and no electronic voting machines that are interconnected to the internet.
Are we going to be able to get there?
It's pretty amazing to me that the SAVE Act, which the president has renamed the Save America Act, is having trouble getting that through the Senate, because I keep hearing that it's controversial. And then you look at it, it only says two things. One, you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote in a federal election. And two, you need a photo ID in order to vote. Well, you need a photo ID to get on an airplane. Why would it not make sense to have a photo ID to vote? I'm sorry, but I don't find that racist. In fact, what I find racist is the implication that people of color are incapable of getting a photo ID, because, of course, they're not. Yet, I do think there's 50 votes for it in the Senate, but the Senate leadership won't post it for a vote until there are 60 votes for cloture, which as of today is not going to happen. Now you have a discussion, which is interesting to me, of connecting the extension of the FISA court authority. That's the government's ability to spy and collect information on foreign nationals, even if those foreign nationals are in communications with U.S. citizens, to connect that, because that law is expiring and requires renewal, to connect that renewal to passage of the SAFE Act. Because there are elements of the government who really want FISA to be renewed, and they can have that, but only if they agree to pass the SAVE Act. I think that's a brilliant move. In the end, sadly, I don't think either one is going to happen. I have to tell you the truth about that.
Roger Stone, I'll be listening to you this afternoon when your show comes up between 3 and 5.
Yes, you most certainly are. Out by popular demand, John. My mother's recipe for stuffed cabbage. Hungarian stuffed cabbage, today on the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable.
Well, this is Dr. Peter Michalos. Live long and prosper. Dr. Peter, what do we do this week to live longer?
Well, today, John, we're going to talk about a very important topic, and that is prostate health and bladder health for longevity. And the prostate is a small gland below the bladder that helps produce seminal fluid. As men age, the prostate tends to grow larger, and the growth is usually non-cancerous and is known as BPH, benign prostatic hypertrophy. And what happens, it doesn't mean that you have cancer, but it presses on the urethra, which is the tube that we make our urine in. It makes urination more difficult. And as we get older, that's why it's important. An important tip for men is if you drink water, we're supposed to drink half an ounce to 1 ounce based on our pounds. So if you're a 150-pound man, you should have 150 ounces, or at minimum 75 ounces of fluid a day. The trick is try to drink most of it by 6 p.m. And then after 6 p.m., if you can have any water, just have sips. So this way, your kidney, by the time it processes it, you're not up all night or getting up in the middle of the night to urinate.
So let me ask you a question. I usually take a Taurocide pill, which is a water pill, before I go to bed, because the only time the Taurocide pill works is if you're laying down. The Taurocide pill doesn't work well unless you're laying down, and you're saying is reduce the water before 6 o'clock so you don't have to get up twice.
Right. You don't get up as much, and I tried that on myself, and it does work. And then some of the things that we can do to the foods that we can eat to help protect our prostate are eating cooked tomatoes because they're high in something called lycopene, and lycopene has been found to help improve prostate health and reduce inflammation. Also, fatty fish like salmon, we found that omega-3s are also important and help the reduce the inflammation in the prostate. Also, things like broccoli, kale, berries, nuts and seeds, all those help. And also green tea is very powerful antioxidant, and it's also for longevity because it contains.
So if you're going to have tea at night, tea makes you go to the bathroom more. So you can't really have tea after 6 o'clock.
Right. Green tea.
I mean,
in the morning.
If I'm on my 5 o'clock show and I have tea, by the time I leave the show at 5 minutes after 6, I got to go to the bathroom again.
Right, but then choose chamomile tea, which doesn't make you urinate as much.
So chamomile tea if it's after 6 o'clock at night, green tea if it's before 6 o'clock at night.
Right, and you want to avoid caffeine at night because it's a diuretic and a bladder stimulant. And also alcohol, of course, is very irritating to the
I don't drink.
bladder. Right, neither do I.
I follow your rules. No alcohol, no sugar, no salt.
Right, and sugar, of course, feeds the prostate. And we know that as people's insulin rises, it pushes sugar into the cells. So that's why rising fasting insulin levels and insulin resistance cause the prostate to grow. That's why if we can keep our blood sugar under control, we don't feed the prostate and other cancers. So it's important to keep our fasting insulin levels low, avoid the sugar. Also, spicy foods, salt, and even sparkling water is irritating to the bladder, and it's not good for people with benign prostatic hypertrophy. And, of course, the red meat now.
What's benign?
It's when your prostate enlarged. Benign prostate hypertrophy is your prostate gets big, it pushes on the bladder, and it makes you feel like you're full and you want to pee.
In other words, we shouldn't drink mineral water after 6 o'clock.
You shouldn't be drinking mineral water if you have prostate problems, and especially after 6 o'clock, because it irritates the bladder and it makes you want to pee more. And red meat contains hormones that increases inflammation and makes the prostate grow. And you don't want to eat things like chili paper, curry sauce, hot sauce, because that also irritates the prostate and makes you want to urinate more and increases the symptoms. Of course, you got to check your PSA levels. When you go to your doctor, they do a digital exam. If they see a hard lump or any bump in your prostate, then you worry about prostate cancer. If your PSA level is above 4, then you usually start a workup for prostate cancer. And, it's a very important area. And there are new procedures like aqua ablation where they have a robot, basically. They stick in a catheter with real-time ultrasound, and it basically cores out, like it cores out an apple, and it opens up the space. And it can open up the prostate so people will need less medicine and have better urination, and that's a new state-of-the-art procedure. And there's an organization for men with prostate cancer called Fans for the Cure, done by the great Joe Cosgrove, and he's developed this entire prostate community to help people find referrals and learn about the latest procedures. And he actually told me the other day he was at a conference, and Johnson & Johnson came out with an amazing new medicine called Areolad paltutamide, and basically they found that it has a dramatic reduction in the risk of prostate metastases in men with prostate cancer. So like you always say on our show, is we're getting to new things with warp speed, and this new medicine now is giving more hope to the men with prostate cancer. So these are some of the tips to help keep your prostate healthy for years to come, because it's an important function that we have.
Dr. Peter Mihalos, thank you for coming on, and I'll meet you at the age of 100.
Thank you, John, for always getting the truth out to our listeners on the Cats Roundtable.
The Cats Roundtable.
Well, every Sunday we have Lynn Shaw, who is looking for ways to protect our children. Well, Lynn Shaw at lynswarriors.org. What do we have for our audience this week?
John, first of all, I got to start with happy Father's Day. We wish everybody a wonderful day, all the dads and granddads out there, and the importance of the father and granddads in our American families. John, we talk a lot, you and me, about AI, artificial intelligence, right? And it's taking over everything. But I want to bring forward some facts here. We now have 44 state attorneys general, Republicans and Democrats alike. They sent a message to AI. They sent a big, long letter to all of the big tech, CEOs. They have said enough is enough. If you come forward with all of this artificial intelligence that harms children, and we're talking about these chatbots we've spoken about, these chat companions, anything that harms, exploits minors, or puts profits that we can prove ahead of safety, you will face consequences. And we at the Warriors, John, we can't agree more. And I'll tell you why this is important. Because right now there is chaos in Washington. There is all this talk about AI. We want to be the global leader. Yes, we can all agree. We want the United States to be at the forefront of all. But at the same time, behind the scenes, you've got parents whose kids have been harmed from social media. We got all the studies now. We've got Republicans and Democrats fighting about this. There's also at the White House this AI framework being created. I might add to this, John, by a lot of Silicon Valley people. So you know what that means? They have their best interests in moving forward with doing something called preemption, which means, John, that the states in the last couple of years have done a tremendous job, better than our federal government, in putting out safety laws, legislation to keep our kids safe. Now, the federal government is talking about we're going to have one standard. We're going to come in. We want to erase all those states, everything they have done to have this one federal standard, which right now, and it harms me to say this, looks like it's in favor of big tech and their profits, another runaway train, harmful to our kids. So, we are so proud that these 44 state attorneys general, and I'm sorry, let me call them out, Alabama, California, Georgia, Kentucky, Missouri, and Texas, would not sign on. But we got 44. That is an amazing amount, John, that say if you harm kids, we're coming after you legally. We at the Warriors, we are pro-innovation. We're asking for a few simple safeguards for our kids, like our lingering Kids Online Safety Act. It's not going to harm. We're not going to stop big tech. We're not going to stop things that are going on. We want some safeguards for the kids. I mean, why should we allow them to create, fake images, pornography, clone voices now, impersonate kids, chatbots manipulating emotions, giving babies teddy bears with AI voices in them that say, harm your siblings. These are all things that can be backed up by facts. I'm not just spewing this off, but this is harmful content. And we know from our 30 years now of social media how it can affect children. So we want to agree with these 44 state attorneys general. We want to call them out. We want some action on this, and government has to be part of the answer right now. There is no other way. Yes, parents need to step up. They need to understand that they are the first line of defense. Schools have to get involved. Communities matter. But technology, John, these technology companies making trillions. I don't even know the number of money they make. Whatever is beyond trillions. They must be held accountable, making all this money off the backs of our kids, and that is why we need.
I agree with you. They make enough money, and they make enough billions, and the companies are valued in trillions that they should worry about the kids in our country.
Again, I don't like saying this, but it's the reality. It's a drop in the bucket for these companies to be held responsible. So they're going to lose a little revenue. All right, let's look at it that way. They got plenty of other revenue going on right now. Reminder, in Washington, they have one lobbyist per every 4 members of Congress. So just think about that those lobbyists are in the ears all day long of the, legislators, their aides and things like that, their staff. That's what they remember when they go to the floor to vote on something. I mean, the money talks. Let's talk about it right now. But John,
Lynn Shaw, I want to thank you for all of that, and we're out of time, but let's continue talking every week. Every week, let's pound it away, save our kids, and thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, John. Lynn'sWarriors.org, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. Every Sunday morning, we'll bring you the latest in what's happening in our community, our country, and the world. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a nice Sunday.